Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX14 Walsh and welcome to some more Gran Turismo Sport, a racing game developed by Polyphony Digital and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment for the PlayStation 4. Focusing on the game's online mode, known as Sport Mode, in this episode I take a look at my performance in the 9th race of the 2019 Manufacturers Series pre-season, which was held at the Autopolis International Racing Course circuit. This saw a race in the Group 4 category, with my vehicle being the BMW M4. With that, let's get racing. Taking a look at the grid then, you'll see that I've qualified in 2nd place out of 20 cars, always being C driver rating drivers. My story for qualifying, I was very pleased with qualifying 2nd because this slotted into my overall race strategy nicely. Now the difficulty I had with this race in particular, it being a 9-lap race on a circuit that was very aggressive on its tyre wear in general, with there being a lot of left hand, right hand corners, flowing corners, hairpins, etc. was the fact that the mixture of fuel consumption and tyre wear set into this race meant that my initial stint of 5 laps on the harder of the two compound available, the racing medium, the other being the racing soft, was going to be one where I'd lose a lot of time if I drove the car too hard, because tyre wear would really start to creep in on laps 4 and 5 of that initial stint. Now I mean I end up coming off the race pace by about 2 to 3 seconds a lap, costing me a lot of time and potentially a number of positions. Albeit I could target trying to make those up on the 2nd stint, where it'd be a 4-lap stint with less fuel in the car, another set of mediums on board which would be used more effectively because I'd have 1 lap less to run them on, so I could be more aggressive with the car. So instead what I decided to do was focus a lot of my practice time on doing a very good qualifying lap to get me as high up the grid as possible. 2nd in this case, 1st place was well away by 1.3 seconds from myself, with the target on that 1st stint of effectively trying to defend my position where possible, let people through if they were much faster than me after perhaps a little bit of defence, or just letting them through at a position that I wouldn't lose too much time, and then try to make up the positions lost in the 2nd stint. So to be in 2nd rather than say 10th meant that whilst I had a lot of people behind me, it meant that I could really go racing that 2nd stint and try to gain 1 or 2 positions right at the end. Also, that was my thought process. Any other considerations? Well, with fuel saving being a factor here, you're going to see I'm going to be running the car for the majority of each lap in fuel setting 2. Didn't really get comfortable with the whole concept of short shifting for this race, so I decided to abandon that and find a fuel map strategy which just about got me to the end of the race. With that, we're about to get underway with a rolling start as always for this series. And what you'll see me do straight away is I'm going to pull into the slipstream of the Volkswagen in front, the Scirocco, and see if they can pull me along to the 1st corner. While the Porsche behind, Golden Dragon, keep an eye on that name, being a very comfortable driver on this track and a very fast driver in that Porsche. And as soon as we cross the line to start lap number 1, we are going to jump into the replay camera, because something's going to happen as we go into turns 1, 2 and 3. It gets a little bit exciting, and I think the replay shows it better than my perspective. So we're coming down to the 1st corner, everybody's tucked in behind one another with the slipstream. I'm going to go a bit deep on the brakes here and actually go wide on the corner and out onto the gravel. Now Golden behind me does the same in the Porsche a little bit and taps me in the back and then comes back onto the track as we tap each other in the side, and we're racing through turn 2 down into turn 3. And I've got the inside line here, so I've got the defensive line as we come into turn 3 here. Golden's going to turn into the side of my car just as I go to turn in, anticipating perhaps I would have turned in a bit earlier being on the inside line, and that caused them to fall back quite a bit, and I've been able to hold on to 2nd place. But remember them, because they will be coming back up through the grid and challenging again much later on in the race. In the meantime then, we are going to stay in the replay view, keeping an eye on how our car's flying through the corners as we come through turn 9 here. Wonderful flying left-hander here. We've got the Hyundai and the Scirocco, or the Volkswagen, behind us in 3rd and 4th. Love the replay camera as well for GT Sport. I didn't realise how wonderfully designed it is in terms of the way it's laid out, the camera angles for all the different tracks. As we come up into turn number 11 here, the 2nd of the 2 hairpins, just bringing the car around in 2nd gear, getting on the power nicely, and now going down the hill towards turn 12. Now you can see at the front of your screen the Volkswagen Scirocco that qualified first is just pulling away from the rest of the field. What I anticipated is coming true in the fact that I would fall off from the race leader very quickly and instead be trying to hold on to second place for as long as possible. And behind we've got another Volkswagen Scirocco who's really coming up fast on our 6 here as we go through the final complex here of 15, 16 and 17. Tight set of corners, we're doing them all in third gear, and then we're going to come round into 17 at this point, just coming out 16 and into 17 here, up towards turn 18, an extended right-hander here which we'll manage in third gear, and then onto a tiny little corner to wrap up lap turn 19. And as we come around to complete lap number 1, we can see that the gap between myself and first place is just opening up wider and wider, whereas the gap between myself and third place is getting tighter and tighter. That Volkswagen behind is really pushing their car around the track, whereas at least more confident in their car's capabilities compared to my own. So as we come down to take turn number 1 for the second time then, I'm going to get it right this time. I go a little bit earlier on the brakes, scared of the fact that I made the mistake on the first lap. Now this wasn't through me fast flying behind another car compared to my previous mistake which I made at Suzuka last time out. Instead, this time it was just simply me getting on the brakes a little bit too late, and that's something I did have a bit of difficulty with turn 1 in general on this track. I found sometimes I just go a tiny bit too late on the brakes and then end up sending the car off into the gravel, and I practiced getting the car back under control to try and not lose too much time. But of course, anytime your car's not on the track and onto the gravel or onto the grass, you're going to be losing some time, and that was felt on lap number 1. But in lap number 2, as we're coming through turns 8 and then coming through into 9, the flying left-hander here, we can see that the Volkswagen behind is really tight on our 6 now. As we go up the hill here, turn 10 and up into the hairpin at turn 11, we're going to take the outside line. The Volkswagen's going to brake rather deep and take the inside line here. I was hoping potentially to do a cutback, but the Volkswagen covers off that line very nicely and I have to come back out on the outside again. As we switch back to my perspective, didn't realise the Volkswagen at the time had a 3-second penalty, so I regained second place while them having to take the penalty in this section here. The only penalty section on the track, rather interestingly. I expected there to also be a penalty section on the main straight or the start straight. That didn't exist, so instead it was on that smaller straight there, and that's worked out in our favour. And we can see now, looking on the left hand side of your screen, that Golden Dragon is once again up into third, doing a fantastic job already, albeit they've fallen back into fourth now as they're fighting a Frenchman for third place. Just keep an eye on their position as they go back up into third now, and we're coming towards the end of lap number 2. Now, that gap between myself and first place is out to 3.1 seconds at this point. I'm really not trying to push to close that gap down. I'm expecting it to continue to expand, albeit it is contracting a little bit at the moment as we come towards the start-finish line to start lap number 3. And then it's holding around the 3.1 second margin. Looking at our fuel saving at this point, we've got 75% fuel, 6.2 laps remaining. We've still got a full 7 laps to go, so fuel saving's going alright so far. We're going to have to keep applying it, however. We've got no room for error in terms of changing our fuel map setting. If we make one mistake on one lap, that's going to compromise our entire fuel saving strategy for this race. So you'll see as we come down into turn 3, I'm going to be flicking up into mode 2 and coming through into turn 3 now, braking just before the 50 ball, getting down into third gear, keeping the car tight through the corner, letting it flow out, and then swinging in to the combination turn of turns 4, 5 and then into the first of the hairpins at turn 6. Coming down to second gear at this point, we're just going to follow the car through here and let the momentum ride out towards the left hand side, the outside of the track, as we come through 7, then through into the little corner that is 8, and then holding on round into turn 9, which is the rest of this left hander here, and then going through into the flying right hander turn 10 here, and then finally up into the hairpin at turn 11, the second of the 2 hairpins. Now the gap behind at this point is 3.8 seconds, but it is going to contract. Up ahead, the gap's now up to 4.4 seconds, 4.7 seconds. It looks as though the Volkswagen in front got a very nice drive off of turn 11 compared to myself, and that's causing the gap to continually expand. And that's one thing I did find, that getting a good drive off of turn 11 costs you a lot of time in terms of if you didn't get it right, but if you got a fantastic drive, you gained a lot of time on the guy in front or from the guy behind. But you can see already, looking at our tyre weight in the bottom left hand corner of your screen, tyre wear is really becoming a factor already in this third lap, and so I'm really trying not to push too hard on the tyres. I go a little bit deep here as I go through turn 15, coming up into 16, then through into 17. Doesn't cost me too much time in terms of my race pace, but we can see that the chap behind in the Porsche is really gaining us now, already down to 2.6 seconds. They feel much more comfortable in their car at this stage in the race, and it's showing. As we come around to conclude lap number 3 and looking at our laps remaining on the fuel board, we can see it's now 5.4, so it's improving. We're getting closer and closer to equalising the numbers, so that way we don't have to worry as much about fuel saving anymore. And as we come through into turn 1 for the 4th time then, getting ready to go down into third gear, braking it well before the 50 board there, braking just a little bit before a little orange marker on one of the barricades on the left hand side. That was what I was using as my brake point, or my brake reference point I should say, bringing that further and further back with tyre wear becoming a greater issue over the course of this first stint. Now coming through turn 3 here, down to fuel mode 2 as well, and then following through at turns 4 and 5 and then into the hairpin at 6. Looking at our rear view mirror at this point, we can see that Porsche is getting ever closer, the gap now down to 2.1 seconds. As I get a little bit deep coming out of turn 6, and that does cost me a bit of time there. Looks like it cost me 3/10 of a second, as we're now coming through to 8 and 9, and we can see that the Porsche is just gaining and gaining and gaining, as we're coming up into 10 and 11. In terms of our lap times, they've been relatively consistent so far. If we ignore lap number 1, number 2 is 156.3, number 3 is 157.8. We could say quite a bit of that time was lost to our attempted manoeuvre in cutting back against the Volkswagen that took us in turn 11. And then they got caught with the penalty, obviously, so they had to give up the position to us. But as we come down into 12 now, we get a decent drive off of turn 11, which means the Porsche isn't able to gain too much time. But as we come through into 12 here, I take a much slower approach into the corner, going down into 3rd gear rather than throwing the car in at 4th gear with a little bit more speed, because I was concerned I'd end up going too deep and onto the gravel on the outside of the circuit. Whereas the Porsche seems to be managing their tyres much more efficiently and seems to be the better handling car for this circuit. And we can see that we've got them full in our rear view mirror at the moment as we're coming towards the end of lap 4 and on to lap 5. Now, I was hoping perhaps the Porsche would go into the pits at this point and go for an undercut and just simply overtake me through the undercut rather than overtaking me on track, because then I wouldn't have to worry as much about potentially defending them, because some people do like to go in early on that first stint in order to essentially make up time for an undercut and then have to drive the final lap of the race a little bit more conservatively. But the Porsche is right on our 6, carrying through to lap number 5 like myself, as we now switch back to the replay camera here and watch this lap unfold. Now we can see going down into turn 1 here, getting on the brakes as standard, going a little bit wide on the corner, not as tight as perhaps I would have liked, but got the corner nested nicely there and able to get on the power going through turn 2, down into 3. I initially take an inside line thinking the Porsche was quite close, but they're still far back, so I go onto the outside to take the natural racing line through turn 3, but we can see that Porsche is getting closer and closer. They're making up the time on every corner and every straight section. Now well within our slipstream as we come down into turn 6, the first of the 2 hairpins. They take a little look on the outside but don't go for it at that point, staying in behind myself. They get a good drive off of turn 6 and now they're on our right hand side, just trying to cut up the right hand side, but they haven't got enough of their car in front of us yet, so we're able to cut back onto our standard racing line, going through 8 and 9 now, and we can see they're really pushing us at that moment, and they're just off our rear bumper. They're a much faster car, so what I decide to do is go for a defense going up into 11 here, but I'm expecting them to overtake me, so I go for the inside line, a much slower line, a defensive one. If the Porsche wants me, they're going to have to go around the outside, and they're doing very well, and they get a fantastic drive off the corner. So now it's a race down to turn 12 here, and as we can see, the Porsche's just got a little bit more speed in terms of their run off of turn 11, so I tuck in behind. I take a look down the inside in case I brake a little bit later than them, but they're a little bit late on the brakes compared to myself, so I just stay behind the Porsche at this point and think to myself, right, just follow them. They get a little bit sideways as they go through turn 13, and now we go up into 14 here, so perhaps they may make a little bit of an error. Perhaps tyre wear is a consideration for them, but they're just pushing the car really to the limit, and we're holding in nicely here to bring stint 1 to an end. We can see they're getting a little bit sideways again, going through 15 into 16, and that means their car is very heavy or worn on tyres at the moment, much like our own, so it's not as though they're having an easy race compared to us, as they're struggling to pull away from us right now. And we're going to be both coming into the pit at the end of this lap to put on a fresh set of rubber, and it'll be time for us to go racing against them. Ducking into the pits then, bringing it down into 2nd gear, just coming in nice and tight, and we'll tell our guys to put on a set of racing mediums, but do not refuel the car. And we can see that in terms of our fuel saving, we've got 44% fuel remaining. Everybody else has got a lot more fuel. We would assume that's because they've been doing a lot of short shifting. Again, as I said at the start of this race, I wasn't comfortable with short shifting. It just seemed to knock my concentration over the course of this race. So that's why I've got less fuel in the car. I should point out that if I'd done quite a bit of short shifting, then I would have been able to do this second stint, or a good chunk of it at least, in fuel mode 1, and perhaps that would have got me a bit closer to the Porsche over the course of this second stint. But it's all to play for, as we see the Porsche does make a mistake going through turn 1 into 2 here, and I'm right on their backside at this point, and I'm holding onto the slipstream in fuel mode 2, and I'm able to get really close as we go into turn 3 here, albeit they brake a little bit later. They've got a bit more confidence on their racing point there. Going into turn 3 now, 4 and then 5. I'm just going to stay behind them, holding their slipstream, keep within 1 to 1.5 seconds of them as the gap widens and then contracts over the course of each lap, and perhaps get them towards the end of the stint where perhaps they push their car so hard that tyre wear becomes a factor and they make an unenforced error, as we perhaps almost saw at the end of the first stint. But do keep in mind they've been driving a solid race so far, and we're going to have to drive just a solid one if we want to get 2nd place back from them. The chap behind us in 4th place was the driver who started it in 20th, and they've done an absolutely fantastic job in getting their car all the way up to 4th. It just goes to show you, wherever you qualify, you can always make up places, and they've made up a lot of ground. We do fall back a little bit from the Porsche at this point, at least initially, as we get the drive off of turn 11, but then we gradually start to bring that gap into a stable fashion around the 0.97 second margin. But as we come through turns 13, 14, we can see that gap is widening a little bit, just going above a second. The Alfa Romeo behind is quite close, just a second between us and them. But I'm more focused on the Porsche at the moment, because I'm expecting if I can keep this distance from them and I can keep the same distance from the Alfa Romeo behind, then that way we're effectively dragging one another around the circuit. As we're coming through here into what is turn 18, sorry, just checking the circuit map one more time to wrap up lap number 6. We can see Porsche's getting a tiny bit sideways coming off of turn 18 going into 19 here, and it's all working to our advantage in the fact that we can continuously keep a position right behind them, and we're continuously gaining speed on the straight here. And following up into turn 1, they're getting a little bit side to side there, perhaps trying to shake us off of their slipstream. Going into turn 1 then, breaking out our standard point, and we can see the difference in terms of braking points and lines through turn 1, where we brake a lot earlier, and that means we're not as close to the Porsche as perhaps we could have been, as we're now charging down towards turn number 3 here. Keeping in fuel mode too, because all this running their slipstream means I can save that little bit extra fuel, and thereby not have to worry as much about perhaps jumping down to fuel mode 3 or fuel mode 4 on the final lap, which is what I sometimes had to do over the course of my race simulation runs. We're right on the back of the Porsche here as we go through turn 6. And we can see they're not having the cleanest of lines on this lap so far. So I take a little peek on the outside here as we go through turn 7. And looking at turn 8, I tried to put my nose down the inside, but what I realised is, no, I just haven't quite got my nose there in order to try and get on that inside line. So I pull back instead a little bit and get ready to try and push them going up into turn 11 here. But we can see that gap is widening a little bit, 0.655 seconds at this moment. And now we come down into turn 11. We're going to get a decent drive off the corner, albeit we do go a little bit wide, and that costs us time compared to the Porsche. It now pulls away to 0.992 seconds, and then up to 1 second, and slightly increasing. And now we come down into turns 12 and 13. And we just can't quite get ourselves into that position to go for that overtake. And it seems that every time we gain a little bit of time at the moment, they're able to find a space on the track or a corner on the track where they have a much smoother line or a much better approach compared to our own driving approach, and that means they're able to pull that gap out, and then we've got to work to close it once again. And that was the great thing about this fight with the chap in front, Golden Dragon, that every time I got close, it was as if they had the ability just to pull a little bit of time out on myself where I'd perhaps make a tiny little mistake compared to my standard racing line. Alternatively, just my racing lines were not as favourable as their own, and it meant that I had to really work hard to stay close to them. As we can see, the gap's now expanded to 1.3 seconds, so I'm a bit further back than on the previous lap, but I'm not out of it yet. We've still got 2 laps to go, remember that. And we can see now that our laps remaining is 1.7, we've got 2 laps to go, so that means we've pretty much done enough fuel saving to get us to the end at this point, as long as we continue to use the approach of dropping down to fuel mode 2 as we come into turn number 3 on the final 2 laps as well. And as we come down to turn 3, we can see the gap is now starting to close up. On these straighter sections, I seem to have a bit of a speed advantage, but as we start to go through the technical bits, the corners, that's where things equalise or turns into the favour of the Porsche. As we come through here into turn 6 for the 8th time, I'm nowhere near as close as I was previously. Pardon me. But looking at the gaps between myself and 4th, 5th and 6th, it looks as though, well, particularly 4th place, 3.2 seconds, I'm not going to have to worry about them anymore. This is purely a fight for 2nd place. 1st place is so far up the road that everybody's forgotten about 1st place by the looks of things. And we're just going to keep trying to push to get this Porsche towards the end of the race. Coming up into turn 11 then. Breaking out our standard point, trying to get a nice smooth line through here to get a better run off the corner and charge down to 12 and get the gap to close between myself and Golden Dragon. Unfortunately, it's not working out. It's 1.3 seconds. Oh, I wish I could get a bit closer to get back into their slipstream. It's going to have to be a Herculean effort by the looks of things. Looking at our tyre wear, bottom left hand corner of your screen, tyre wear's much better compared to on our first stint. It's been good running so far. The tyres are going to hold on long enough as we're on our 3rd lap of this 4-lap stint. Get a little bit wide when we went through turn 13. Now that's cost us half a second in following the Porsche now, going through 15, 16 and 17, and we're really starting to fall back on them. But again, remember, tyre wear is always a factor, and we're both pushing our cars hard, so at any point one of us could make a mistake and that gap will come crashing down. And we can see the gap is now 1.6 seconds as we're getting the warning to say we've only got a lap of fuel left, so we're going to be right on the limit in terms of fuel load at the end of this race. Will we have brought enough fuel to make it to the end of the race unscathed on fuel capacity? Who knows? But anyway, as we come on to the final lap then, one last chance to try and get 2nd place back from Golden Dragon. Can we do it? So coming down into turn 1, braking just before the orange markers there, going down into 3rd gear. Taking our standard line here, perhaps a slow line compared to them, but they get a little bit off the track there, coming out of turn 1, and that means we're really going to gain on them as we come down into turn 3. You can see that gap shot to 1.1 seconds, 1 second, dead on 1 second at this point, 0.9. Now I'm coming down, we're using an aggressive line here to get through turn 3, getting closer and closer to them by looks of things as we go through 4 and then into 5. That Porsche's back end is getting a little wobbly at this point, perhaps tyre wear is catching up with them. Now coming down into turn 6 here, 0.6 seconds away from them at this point. They get a smoother line, however, coming out of the corner. They get on the power a little bit earlier, but one wheel on the grass, but that doesn't really affect them too much, and the gap widens up to 1 second. Now coming through into turns 8 and 9, flying through into 9 at this point. Trying to keep a hold on the rear of that Porsche. They're just getting out of slipstream range at this point. We'll be coming up into 11. Perhaps we can get a much better exit coming out of 11. Now we're able to get us closer and closer to their rear end and get us back into the path of their slipstream. Take it down into second gear. And as we come around the corner here, get a very nice drive off the line. They get a little bit sideways. That takes away 0.3 of a second, dropping down to 1.2, 1.1. Staying in the region of 1.1 seconds now as we come down into turn 12 and flying through into 13. Coming through in fourth gear here, I decide to be a little bit braver this time and really go for it in a higher gear. But as we come through into turn 13 here, I have to realise reality, tyres are not there anymore and I have to drop down into third gear. 1 second off the back end of that Porsche. We're going to keep pushing all the way to the end here as we come through 14 into 15. And coming up into 16 now. And 16 the left-hander here. And as you can see, that gap's just not coming down enough and they're not making any more mistakes. And because I've been pushing the car so hard, as I come through 17, I got a little bit wide, and that's my race for second over, unfortunately. And I'm going to have to bring the M4 home in a third place, which was hard fought, but congratulations to Golden Dagon on their second place. Fantastic race by them. And hey, at the end of the day, we brought the M4 home in third place. Can't complain about that. A tough race, but a solid result. I'm not going to complain about third, and I've identified a new item I need to work on, and that is fuel saving through short shifting. This race was one of two halves in effect. The first half being the more conservative fuel saving stint of 5 laps, where I needed to do as much fuel saving as possible so I could be more aggressive in the second stint. Unfortunately, because I did not employ fuel saving through short shifting, it meant that second stint I could be more aggressive on the tyres, but not in terms of the amount of fuel I used. And perhaps I've been able to run the car for 1 or 2 laps completely in fuel map setting 1 to full power. I could have been closer to the back end of the Porsche and perhaps gone for a move for second place. But still, it's something to work on, and now we must move on to the final race of the series at the Autodrome Largo Maggiore circuit this Saturday. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, comment or subscribe for future episodes. As always, I've been TX141, and until next time, take care.